This is an introduction on how to navigate Orbis. Before we go into Orbis, the database that collects financial data at the level of firms over several years, several industries, almost all countries. Well, before we go into that, which is a maze and a jungle, you will need a plan. So in this video, I'll show you first the plan that the team who submitted example B had before going into Orbis. That plan is in their paper on page 9. They list there the variables of their interest. You can see that table listing them from Y1 to C4. Now, on the left-hand side of the screen, I give you some explanation. The fact that their multiple regression model, the planned one, guided their navigation on Orbis. Specifically, they had two models, one for H1, the other for H2. Different dependent variables for each, the same independent variable X for each of them, as well as most of the controls. You see them there from C1 to C2, C3, and a C4 control, which they also collected from a different source, not Orbis. Specifically, I read at the bottom that dependent variables, Y1, Y2, and that last control variable were hand collected from Instagram. So this team had a mixed method approach. They got archival data from Orbis mixed with their hand collected data from Instagram. One note here before we go into Orbis is that these last three variables, no, sorry, the main dependent variables, Y1 and Y2 were measured in 2002, the year of the submission that this team had, which confirms with the rule for inferring causality. If the year is subsequent or the time interval is of the dependent variable follows the time interval the time interval of the independent variable, then causality can be partly inferred. And this is the case here. Y1, Y2 were measured in 2022, and the main X in both models was measured in 2020 from Orbis. So causality can be partly inferred in this case. Avoid getting data for both y and the x in the same time interval. That's going to give you association, correlation, and not, you won't be able to help you make claims about causality. So this is the plan. Usually it's nice to have it on a different screen. I have it on my other screen, these four variables we need to get from Orbis, namely X, which is working capital per employee. First control, we'll go over control in the next weeks. So we'll explain what controls are. C1 is the number of employees as a measure of firm size. C2 is the total assets of the firm as another measure of firm size. And C3 is a measure of how effective the firm is, how profitable, if it's a performant or a non-performant team, and that's a continuum measured on the ROA, return on asset. All these three are on Orbis. So now let's switch screens to a main web search. Let's go on Google and type Orbis and UCL, because that's the portal through which you will access Orbis. We click on that first link. You can read this intro. Basically, Orbis is a financial database. It can interest those that have a finance inclination. They want to do mergers and acquisitions. That's M&A, or bank focus. But we are looking for the vanilla sort of flavor that interests all of us. We're going to go on Orbis Plain and wait for us to be logged in. After we are logged in, and I hope you see this, let's make sure I can see. So new share, and yeah, it does show it. I'm going to maximize this so we can see better. Now, this is the page you land on. Already confusing with things on the left, things on the right. The default is Orbis is giving you options to search a company by company name and blah, blah. These are not important. What's important here is to look for an industry. As I mentioned in the lecture, and hopefully it will be emphasized in the seminars, it's important to get a sample of firms in the same industry so you compare apples with apples. You don't want them in different industries because different industries have different challenges, different supply chains, different regulatory constraints. So you want these firms to function in the same environment to compare them accordingly. So the interesting thing when you look for a specific, you could focus on an industry. The team I mentioned, in example, we focused on a blend industry, on the drinks industry, and you'll see how I select drinks. But I want you to hit industry classifications and see possible other industries. The one that comes in mind first is, let's search for video as a keyword, video. And as you can see, we get two industries, 5/9, motion picture, video, and television programs. And we get down here, 7/7, renting a videotapes is not very creative, whereas 5/9/1 is creative. Retail at the bottom is also not very creative. So that's what video gives as possible industries to focus on. Another one that is one of my favorites, since some of you may be interested in the creative industries, I type here arts and I get industry 90, creative arts and entertainment activities. You can get a sample from this industry already. You address a creative research question, in the creative realm by looking at data that has firms functioning in this realm. Another keyword we can look up. I have here research. Now, research can be, as you can see, of different kinds. In advertising, industry 73, advertising and marketing research. Or if you scroll at the bottom, it can be scientific research and development, industry 72. So depending on which one appeals to you, depending on your theoretical argument, the kind of claims you want to make about the kind of research. No, the first kind of research is for commercial use. The second kind of research is for academic or societal use, I would argue. So depending on your angle, you can focus on one of these two. Last keyword to search for an industry before we dive into getting a sample. Let's type here information. Now if you're taking my class, you're IMB students, information, business, management and business. We have information service activities, an industry with firms functioning within this. Ignore the last two, 474 and 467. That's retail and wholesale. It's not really the IT industry in which you could get a sample. Right. So this is enough of getting a sense of, what kind of industry should we look for? Some are more creative, some are more into manufacturing and the routine based. Depends on what kind of setting you're looking for to test or send a coherent message about your paper. If it's creativity, innovation, and R&D, it would be nice to pick an industry in which creativity is a focus of the industry. So I gave you some examples. If it's something else, like I would say, looking more into the input of nature in the natural environment, you can look into agriculture, mining, and so forth. So let's go back to the main page. Usually you do that by clicking search on the left side. We're back into this. And let's now look at the plan that the team that produced example B had to get data from the drinks sort of industry, the soft drinks industry, and get data on those specific variables that I started this session with, that first screen, which was working capital was the first one. How do we look for working capital? Actually, sorry, first step is actually selecting the industry. Let's do that. So we are on activities and industry, then we click on industry classifications. We type here drinks, I think, yeah, manufacturing of soft drinks. We click on that and we wait for you see here a waiting field that kind of selected from the whole mass of firms that exist in Orbis, just the drinks, the manufacturer of soft drinks. And you already see the steps of this mission of carving out your sample. First step is active companies given by default in Orbis. Then the second step is selecting only firms in manufacturing of soft drinks. Now we're looking for actual financials on these firms. So we're clicking financials, the next field under activities and industry. And here we could type employee Sorry, employees. And it gives you a bunch of financials. It's nice to have the number of employees. If you remember, it's one of the controls in that team's model. So we're going to want this control. We'll click on it. Number of employees is a measure of size. How big is that company? The number of employees matter. When we land on this page, again, don't be lost. What you need on this first page is to click the last circle, all companies with a known value. You don't want a lot of rows that are empty for your firms. You want rows that give you data on the size of these companies and specifically on the number of employees. So you click this all companies with a known value. And we're not done. We need to click something else, time period here. As you recall, in absolute numbers in that model, the team looked for data in year 2000 for this measure of size because later on they collected their DV in 2002. So click 2000 or whatever year you think it's important to you. Again, we're waiting here. Choices are being made by Orbis. It's working hard to give you that specification. And once that's done, you click OK. All right. Let's wait again. In addition to the number of employees, they were looking for assets. Again, we click on financials and we hit here total assets. Actually, let's see if it's total assets. We don't want global ratios. We want key financials right at the top, total assets. We do the same thing. We click all companies with a known value. And as a time period, in absolute terms, we want year 2020. Again, we wait for Orbis to input that data. You're going to see there's a nice spreadsheet at the end after we follow all these steps. And even with that spreadsheet, we'll have to tweak a few things. But let's get there slowly. So assets is waiting to download. After assets, we will need firm performance. We hit OK here. And you see now the fourth step, total assets is being included as a search. One nice thing you see in the last column from your initial search, active companies, which was a few hundred millions of companies. In the drinks industry, we have 127,000. Then in this industry, having a known value for 2020 for employees, we only have 1,700 companies. And finally, with total assets, the last step, we have 1,600 companies that have data for all of the above. We're not done. We still need another financial. I said it's the ROA, return on assets. ROA, we need to look at the bottom. So return on assets is in different ways measured. I recommend the one before tax because then you have a clean measure of firm performance that is not affected by what the country taxes are. So usually it's either net profit or profit loss before tax. I think I prefer, which one I prefer? I don't know. There's argument. I'll choose the second one. ROA using net income. Okay. You've seen this before. We have to click all companies with a known value, a time period in absolute term of 2020. And again, we're waiting for Orbis to take that into account and carve out only the firms that have this value. Okay, waiting. The last variable we need to input from Orbis into our spreadsheet is working capital for employee. This variable was claimed by the team as a measure of employee-focused practices. Working capital per employee, a distant measure of how much we focus internally on our employees. And they claim this variable has an impact on their dependent variable presence on Instagram. Right, we have ROA. Now, as I said, another financial we need to look for is working capital. Let's see if it shows it in this first window. If it doesn't show, I'll show another way. Working capital per employee. It's showing it right here. It's the second line. Again, all companies with a known value and the time period in absolute terms, 2020, and we're We're waiting on Orbis. Waiting here. The window is showing at the top left size of the screen. Okay. Now we can look at our spreadsheet, how it looks in Orbis before we download it. One last look at our steps from 1 to 6. We had certain specification given to Orbis, and look how our sample diminished from the big sample that didn't have the data we needed, all the way to 4,000 companies on which we have all this data we require. It's a lot. Imagine 4,300 rows. That's why the team decided to select a random sample from this and then input Instagram um, uh, coded data on viewership. You cannot do this for 4,000 companies. You need to be strategic in selecting a random sample in order to do the manual work of inputting the others. So now we're going to hit view results at the bottom of these steps. View results. Did it take? Yeah. We have a nice table with the companies listed in the first column. You see Coca-Cola there several times. What the team did is they looked at Coca-Cola as the top, the main headquarters, and removed the other Coca-Colas, the smaller um, players in local markets, and other companies. So we see here country codes. Some studies I've seen is they created from the country code a 0-1 variable, US versus the rest of the world, from the remaining companies, because you first have to do the first filter, making sure you have a random sample of representative companies. Then you can create another control variable, country or location, a 0-1, US or non-US. Then automatically you get these NAC codes and consolidation codes. I usually remove these. These are not always useful. They give you operating revenue and number of employees in the last available year. Don't use that because the last available year can be any year. You want that variable in the same year measured. So actually we'll delete these columns to simplify you delete by clicking on it and then delete column and then clicking again, because this is not useful. This is the last available year. We want all our columns and meaning dependent and independent variables measured in the same year. And you're wondering now, but what happened to the others we requested? You have to add and remove columns. So we're actually going to add again the things we wanted. For example, yeah, we have to do it again. In this find a column, we need to type employees. Yeah, number of employees from balance sheet. We want again absolute from 2000. All right, and we do a save, and it shows right here at the bottom. The number of employees is measured in 2000. Let's look for total assets. Total assets in key financials. We want in absolute terms year 2000. Oh, it is already selected. We save. Yeah, and it adds it here on the right hand side in USD dollars for the 2020 year. After total assets, we had the ROA, and I chose the using profit loss before tax. I'm going to click on that, and it's also specified here in year 2000. And finally, the working capital per employee. It's right here, and we add it. It's going to be also in 2000 in USD. Right, we say apply. Yeah, we need that little button on the left-hand side in blue, apply. And if we look again at our spreadsheet, these columns have been added. Number of employees in 2020, a measure of size. Total assets in 2020, a measure of size. ROA in USD dollars, I don't remember the measurement here and how many units, but we have them in absolute terms. This is a measure of performance, which apparently it could drive your presence on Instagram. If you're a high performer financially, you can infuse money into your Instagram. That was the argument behind this control. And finally, the key variable, their X in the whole story about how investing in our employees benefits our presence online, working capital per employee, is shown here. Now, you can get this data in Excel, you can see here these icons at the top. There's Excel you hit. If you hit the Excel, it's gonna convert in Excel and you can download it. I'll just, I want to show you an interesting action here. You can click on actions and then ask Orbis to sort your results randomly. I don't know, I'm gonna hit on that. Yeah, now we have a random sorting. Yeah, you don't see Coca-Cola anymore because Coca-Cola went down the, it's a random. Of course, you can do this later in Excel. You can do your own random sample, but it's interesting that Orbis also offers it. Right, so let's hit explore. No, sorry, not explore, Excel, because we want an Excel document. It's gonna ask you export to Excel in this document. Yes. What would you like to report? The current view. For which companies, all companies, and then export. It's going to take a while depending on your connection. I recommend being on campus when you download the sample to make sure you use good connection. But as you can see, it's processing slowly. One of 4,000 rows. And you still have the mission after you get this large file of 4,000 companies, you still have the mission to get a random sample. And before you do that, make sure that repeat companies like Coca-Cola that has several subsidiaries are represented just by one entry, the main headquarters, the parent company of all companies should be in there, not the subsidiaries. You don't want to compare subsidiaries of Coca-Cola to main Coca-Cola. It's not apples and apples. It's sort of a red apple to green apple, let's say. Oh, looks like it downloaded for me. So if it worked for me. Let me know how it goes for you. Let me know if you have questions. Again, if you are thinking to get a data set at the firm level from Orbis, follow this model I showed you for example B. If you still have questions, let me know. Send me an agenda via email of what questions you specifically want to know about Orbis, and we can have an office hour so I can actually tailor the search for your needs. But tailoring happens after you have a plan. So show me your plan in advance so I can do my own little search. I don't want to get lost when I meet with you and waste that time on our office hour in trying to figure things out. I need to know what you want or looking for. I need to do my homework before meeting you, and together we can figure out a way to download your data set accordingly. Now I'm going to stop recording here, wishing you good luck on this Orbis database navigation. See you in class next time.